Today's show is a review of the Magnepan 0.7X. Yeah, I've been teasing this review for a while now, at least a month, maybe longer. And it was one of those, I kept putting it off because I was having a good time. This is like for me getting reacquainted with the magic of Magnepans. Now, before I get in too far into the details, I just want to say this thing. You know, this speaker is 58 inches tall when it's on its stand. And it's a dipole speaker. It projects forward and rear equally. It's a flat panel. It's just 1.25 inches thick. And the way it fills a room with sound is fundamentally different than a box speaker that's just projecting forward from a tweeter and a mid-range and a woofer. It's a completely different kind of presentation. And I would say more like the sound of real music. In many ways, not 100%, but in many ways, just the way it fills a room with music is more realistic to me than a box speaker does. The thing about the Magnepan, yes, it's 58 inches tall, and the imaging is huge. And with great recordings, these speakers utterly disappear. It's kind of like, let's say, the sonic equivalent of a large screen TV. You know, having like an 85 or 100-inch TV in your room, compared with, let's say, normal speakers with box speakers where the screen is a lot smaller. This just opens up the sound. So in that way, oh yeah, Magnepans and dipole speakers in general, like my reference speaker, the Pure Audio Project Duet 15, does a similar thing. So there's that. But before I get into any technical details, I want to talk about what struck me at first and over again was the way that this speaker does mid-range. So vocals, many acoustic instruments, just at another level than what I'm used to hearing in this room. But the treble detail and clarity and extension and sense of low distortion is absolutely remarkable. So what about the bass? Well, now the bass is a different story. The bass is really clean. The bass is incredibly well integrated into the mid-range and top. It sounds like one driver. It sounds like there's no crossover in this speaker. So what that translates to is it sounds incredibly coherent. There's no sense of bass, mid, and top. It just sounds like one driver making the music. That is really special. And yes, over the price, I'll tell you the price really early in the review. It is $4,000 a pair for the 0.7X. 0.7X does not replace the regular 0.7. That is still in the line. That speaker is $2,000 a pair. Magnepan, the company, was founded in 1969. They've always designed and built all of their speakers, including their least expensive ones, in White Bear Lake, Minnesota. Another thing, I got to stop right there. So they're all dipoles. They're all panel speakers. So the budget for building this speaker from a Magnepan point of view is so much more concentrated on the sound-producing part of the speaker, the driver, the flat panel, in this case, quasi-ribbon driver. Where in a typical box speaker, the majority of the budget goes into building the box to make it look pretty. So whether they paint it or veneer it, that's really expensive. And of course, making the sound of the box not sing along with the drivers. Right? That's hard to do. Because in a conventional box speaker, what happens to the rear wave of the woofer and the mid-range, to some degree, even the tweeter. So they got to build a sturdy box. That's not an issue with Magnepans, right? The back wave just bounces off the wall behind the speaker. So it's a completely different approach. So what all this leads up to is, if you've never lived with or had much good experience having listening time with a dipole speaker, not just Magnepans, but electrostatic speakers, open baffle speakers, or Magnepans, you literally do not know what you're missing and what they could do. But I would quickly add, they are not perfect speakers. No, definitely not perfect. I can point out the ways that they are not perfect. Oh, but the one thing, before I get to their imperfection, I just want to point this out. So the mid-range is fantastic in its believability. But the high frequencies coming off the ribbon tweeter, which is 41 inches tall. I'll show you a picture of what a Magnepan looks like without the grill. Those skinny lines on the right side of the picture, that's the tweeter part of it, and the rest of it is the mid-woofer. So the tweeter is 41 inches tall, and the mid-woofer part of the 0.7X is 8.5 inches by 40 inches tall. So the radiating area of the drivers is huge compared to box speakers, especially ones with 1-inch dome tweeters compared to a 41-inch tall tweeter. What does that mean? It means that the tweeter doesn't move. It doesn't have to move, and neither does the woofer mid-range because the area is so large. When I say move, I mean back and forth excursion. All right, so let me talk a bit about the limitations of the 0.7X, sonic limitations. It doesn't do bass impact. You don't feel the kick drum. That's not in the cards for this speaker. It does go down reasonably low. I would say maybe 50 hertz or so. And that's fine. And I was not tempted even for a second to use a subwoofer with the 0.7 because I just like to take it on its own merit. If I want a speaker that does that, I listen to another speaker. But I will quickly add that many people who own Magnepans, especially the smaller ones, but even the big ones, do add subwoofers to give that low bass thump. So it's on the table. You can use it that way. I choose not to. But the overall sound of the 0.7, as much as it does so many things really well, it's not a speaker that does dynamic range liveliness. It's much more controlled than that. So for music that isn't particularly dynamic, like chamber music, acoustic guitars, strings, flutes, etc., it's fantastic. You don't notice those limitations. But if you play music that really has some kick to it, and I don't just mean in the bass, I mean overall, no, it's not really going to do that. I mean, when you play it, medium loud, let's say 75 dB, it sounds pretty good. You play it louder, 85 dB, 90, it can do that and can sound really, really good. But you never get that sense of live dynamic range. And as for listening at very quiet levels, which I always like to point out in reviews, meaning under 50 dB, you can check how quiet you're actually listening or how loud you're listening with an SPL meter in your phone by getting an app sound pressure level meter in your phone. I'll show you the one that I use. Anyway, so yes, they are not at their best. So the 0.7s are not at their best when played very quietly. Actually, like at 50 dB or so, they're good. But 40 dB, etc., that really low, no, you feel like you want to play it loud. That's true. Because the sensitivity of this speaker is definitely on the low side. I will show you the complete specs right now. Oh, by the way, speaking of numbers, it comes with a 3-year warranty. There's a choice of grill colors, and I'm going to put that up on the screen right now because these that I have are in sort of a beige color, which I like a lot. And what else can I tell you? Oh, and they come with stands, but not the stands that you see here. The standard stands tilt the speaker back a bit, and the speaker sits on the floor. It goes all the way down to the floor. With the stands that I have here, these are the optional stands, $300 extra. They raise the speaker about 4 inches. That's where the 58-inch height comes from. Without these stands, then they're 54 inches tall. The back panel of the speaker doesn't have binding posts, but I've never seen a Magnepan that does, so I'm hardly surprised. But now the connections on this speaker are gold-plated, which is nice. Oh, let me talk a bit about setup. Yes, the 0.7X needs to be 3 feet away from the wall behind them. Maybe a little bit less, maybe more, but that's what's required. If you can't do that, then this isn't the speaker for you, but I will say it's pretty light. You can move it back against the wall when you're not listening and move it forward when you are. That absolutely is a thing for a lot of Magnepan owners because they will sound substantially better out into the room. You just slide them forward. But they can be close to the side wall. It could be, let's say, a foot away from the side wall. There's not a lot of horizontal dispersion, especially in the bass. It's canceling to the side of the speaker. So the usual problems of having box speakers near the sidewall, that's not a problem here. That's really good to know. You do angle them in towards the listening position. They're not going to sound great if you just have them parallel to the wall behind them. Now they do need power. They need an amplifier that's comfortable driving 4 ohm loads. This speaker's impedance, I'm guessing, actually drops lower than 4 ohms, so it needs current. Now I used a few different amps over the course of this review. Mostly my reference, which is the Past Labs XA25, but I also used, to stick in a high-powered amplifier, the Gato PWR222 monoblocks that are 250 watts a channel into 8 ohms, 450 watts into 4 ohms. That's plenty, but those are expensive amplifiers. The Gato that's $8,000 a pair. So to try an affordable alternative, I used the amplifier that I just reviewed, the Van Alstyne CA1 integrated amp, $1,600. It's 85 watts a channel into 4 ohms. It sounded really sweet with the 0.7X. So what is the difference between the regular 0.7 and the 0.7X? Regular one is $2,000 a pair. This one is $4,000 a pair. They look exactly the same, at least from the front. And they look very similar from behind. The difference is pretty much all in the crossover network. The crossover parts in standard Magnepans are adequate, but they are not like, let's say, audiophile grade components. In this case, that's pretty much always been true. In the case of the 0.7X, they went all out. And also, just as important as the quality, is that they are matched. All of the capacitors in each speaker are matched precisely to very exacting tolerances. And that's true for the left and right. So for the pair of speakers, the capacitors are right on the money. And as for the inductors, the coils of wire in the crossover, those are wound in-house at the Magnepan factory to ensure that every single inductor is exactly on spec for the left and right speakers especially. They find that hugely important. And it's just how the thing is built. The wiring between the crossover and the panel is different than a standard 0.7. The connections are hardwired and soldered, not clip-on. So there's these detailed differences. Now the X series runs through the line, although it's not available for the LRS Plus. So that's interesting. And owners of 0.7 speakers can send their speakers back to the factory to have them upgraded to X status, let's say. So that's in the works. So if you already have a 0.7, you can have yours upgraded to an X. Now I mentioned the mid-range, and one of the recordings that I used early on in my listening time was this one by Noah Wall. It's a fantastic recording. It's a Chesky recording. I was present at the session, and at least this time you can hear this music on Tidal, this album by Noah Wall. And it's a live to 2-track record, meaning there's no overdubs, there's no fixing things later in the mix. All Noah and the instruments, the whole band, is all recorded from just 2 microphones. And that meant that Noah had to sing, let's say, on top of the band behind her. They were all on the same pair of microphones. She didn't get her own mic, to be more specific about it. Anyway, she has a very big voice. She's not a very big person, but she can really belt it out. She had no problem singing louder than her band. And it was recorded in a church with beautiful acoustics, not a typical dead-sounding studio. And I was there to hear it go down. And hearing this music now on the 0.7X was such a thrill because the tonality of her voice was so there, so beautiful, so human. It's bluegrass music. The entire band sounded in proportion to each other and to her. It was, I don't like using that word, holographic, but that'll do in terms of communicating from me to you what I was getting out of the Magnepans. So at this point, I wanted to do a comparison between the 0.7X and the Magnepan LRS Plus. You just look at this combination, you know that the LRS Plus is going to sound like a smaller speaker because it is. It's going to make less bass. That's easy, of course. But the differences in the mid-range and top end were more dramatic than I imagined they would be. Because, I mean, the LRS Plus is no slouch in that department. But the 0.7X, in terms of its a realism, its life, especially with acoustic music, in this case, the incredible string band. I used a bunch of them. I was in an incredible string band mood. So I wasn't stressing either speaker with big dynamics or anything. I just wanted to keep them in their comfort zone for this part of the test. And yeah, the LRS Plus could not even come close to the upper end detail and clarity and articulation of the 0.7X. So that was easy. And I was playing the Rolling Stones' greatest hits. Yeah, the LRS Plus definitely seemed to constrain and contain the music more than the 0.7X. But again, the 0.7X on its own is not the ideal choice for people that mostly listen to rock music or need music with lots of impact and dynamics. No, it's not going to do that, to be clear. But in this case, yes, the 0.7X was definitely outclassing its little brother, the LRS Plus. And the soundstage on the 0.7X and the LRS Plus is, when you set it up exactly right, is so well focused and can be completely detached from the speakers themselves. The sound just floats in the room. And then I wanted to compare 0.7X with my reference speaker, Pure Audio Project Duet 15. Yes, it has a 15-inch woofer and an 8-inch full-range voxative driver. As soon as I did the comparison, yes, the bigger speaker with a 15-inch woofer had more weight, more solidity to the sound. The speaker is $6,500 a pair, and it's very high sensitivity. And it had more weight, had more impact. Overall dynamics were better, absolutely. But there was still something about the way the 0.7X, its clarity, the way instruments just stood out as individual pieces with the spaces between the instrument. Maybe that's a way of putting it. Were just so much better delineated with the 0.7X. Startlingly so. It was just that immediacy that really grabbed me. And then I'm playing this recording, Stravinsky for 2 pianos. And this is an LP, obviously. And I was using a Grado Epoch 3 cartridge, a very expensive moving iron cartridge, handcrafted here in Brooklyn, as all Grado cartridges are, even the very affordable ones. And I'm playing this recording, and the tone, the piano touch, listening to the 2 players, how it was just so beautiful over the 0.7X. Switching over to the Pure Audio Project, it was still really, really good. But that precision was not there. It was more blurred sounding over the Pure Audio Project than it was over the 0.7X. I think I'm ready to do these. So Steve, what do you really think of the Magnepan 0.7X? I think that the things that this speaker does so well, mid-range is freaking gorgeous, so lifelike, so correct, so natural. Effortless high frequencies, clear, easy to listen to and hear delineation and sparkle and just amazing high frequency detail. I think the bass is actually really good. I felt no need to add a subwoofer for my listening tests. Again, I'm sure many people will. But the bass goes down to 50 hertz or so, which is pretty deep, and it's so clean. Maybe that's it, because the bass is so clear, you don't think there's much of it, as opposed to speakers that would sort of overemphasize the bass because of the lack of control over the woofer. I'm guessing here, right? It depends on the cone speaker you're comparing it to. You know, I just think Magnepan's efforts to make a super version of the 0.7X really paid off. This is an extraordinary speaker. Speaking of extraordinary achievements, yes, it is now time for the Audiophiliac Viewer System of the Day. Ashok sent in these pictures. He lives in Chennai, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, in India. He actually has 2 systems in his music room. TV is a 60-inch OLED LG, and the home theater amplifier is a Denon AVR 250B. The home theater speakers are B&W DM 601s with the matching B&W center channel speaker. The speakers are about 30 years old. He's spinning CDs with a modest Sony player, and that's connected to a Denon PMA 2000 stereo amplifier with dual power supplies. And the speakers, the big speakers, yeah, those are very impressive. Those are Tannoy Kensington Gold Reference. Thank you, Ashok. And now we are back. My name's Steve Guttenberg. I'm glad you're still here watching the video. But I'd like you to consider, you've heard me say this before, joining my Patreon, especially now because I'm making exclusive content for my patrons that will not be shown here on my YouTube channel, just for patrons. So anyway, the address is on the screen right now. Check out the Patreon. You can join for a couple of bucks a month, up to $50 or even $100 a month. At the top 2 levels, you and I will have a conversation every month at the beginning of the month. So, and it's fun. I love having those conversations. I've talked to so many people that watch this channel, and getting feedback from you guys is a thrill that never gets old. So with that out of the way, I will now say thank you so much for watching, and I really, really do hope to see you back here again very, very soon. Bye-bye.